Hi, I'm Ansley Tucker, the Dean of Christ Church Cathedral, and I'm here with Mark McDonald. Mark is our Assistant Director of Music, but lately he has also been serving as our Director of Communications. We are launching today a semi-regular video, just telling people a little bit of what's going on at the Cathedral. We're going to call this the Cathedral Check-In through the glass doors, those big glass doors on Quadra that nobody can come through these days, but there's still lots happening. So we wanted to start today by saying a word about the way in which we've had to pivot as a community to technology as a way of bringing people together. This is not something we were doing well or regularly previously, and we've had to get good at it. And Mark is one of the people who has been helping us get good at it. So thank you, Mark, for that.
Pleasure to be here.
I've learned a lot, all kinds of terminology about slating things. So even song, call it to the end of the service, take one, and Mark claps his hands like this, and he does the loudest clap of anybody I know. I've learned about B-roll, which is all the background video that gets edited in to cover movement and things you don't want people to see. So it's been a learning experience.
Well, for me too. I don't think that I ever expected I'd be doing any of this when I took the job here only a year and a half ago now. And you say, I taught you all this about B-roll and clapping and all that, but I didn't know anything about this in March either. March sort of seems like a decade ago now, doesn't it?
Isn't that funny? Mark and I, before we came on just now, we're talking about the generation gap and how people of my age are, stuck at Facebook. We haven't quite made it to Instagram. And then we were talking about our children's offering called Cathedral Sunlight, and the fact that, well, Mark, who's watching Cathedral Sunlight?
Well, it's really interesting. I've been looking at the stats for the last little while, and one of the gleanings from that is that our demographics are very similar to the demographics that are attending church regularly on Sunday, skewing towards women, 65 plus. I'd say that's about 80 to 90% of our demographic. So you can imagine who's watching Cathedral Sunlight is probably the grandparents sharing Cathedral Sunlight with their grandchildren, which I think is such a lovely image.
But then we thought, if we really wanted to get the kids, we need to go onto TikTok. And Mark said, well, if you want to go onto TikTok, you need somebody who's younger than I am to figure that one out.
Exactly. I'm always willing to learn, but I'm not a TikTok native by any means.
It's just interesting how fast the platforms and technology change, and how quickly you have to pivot to keep up with it. And I guess that's one of the things that makes me really proud of our community, because this is not the native language of probably most people who come to Christ Church Cathedral, and people have worked really hard to acclimatize themselves to Zoom and to going to church online. And so Mark, I wanted to just ask you a little bit about these services that we're putting online, because I gather that there are two ways of doing this. One is that we pre-record a service. And so and at one time we were coming on Thursdays and then making it available to people on Sundays. And then there's live streaming, that's like real time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you just say a bit about how those two are different, and maybe what are the advantages or disadvantages of each?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we back in March, we made a conscious choice to not live stream right away. And the reason for that, when you do something live and it's happening right then, and the information is going out to the internet right away, there's a whole bunch of chains in that sequence that if one of them breaks, then the whole thing goes down. So, if your internet connection is bad, or, if the microphone is not great, like all of these things have to be perfect for a live stream to work properly. And so we weren't super confident about that at the beginning. So we decided that we would pre-record all of the services, edit them together. They were usually recorded in little chunks together, like we do the sermon or we do the musical piece or whatever. And then later on in the week, we would patch it all together as one video and then send it out to everybody.
That was pretty time consuming for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, that kind of stuff takes a really, really long time for the person that has to edit, but also for all the people involved that have to film it. It's, you know, if you do a take and you don't like it, you feel the pressure to do it again. And a service that takes an hour actually takes 2. And so we were finding that that was sort of not a sustainable practice. And it also wasn't very fulfilling from the idea of doing church. So as soon as we could, we moved to live streaming, which I think during the pandemic, we ended up doing that simultaneously when we also opened our doors to a limited congregation back in July.
Right.
And live streaming means that when you press the record button, that video feed is going directly out to the internet and people can watch it in real time. And so that's what we've been doing with both of our morning and evensong services since then. For special occasions like All Souls or the Christmas lessons and carols or those kinds of things, we often will pre-record those because they're a little bit, we want to have a nicer sort of production. So we do some editing and make it look nice. And so those kinds of things we do in advance so that it can be really polished. But our regular services are all live right now.
And does that mean that you can't go back and see them later, or can you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You can go back and see them later. And if you're looking for our videos, there's a couple places you can find them. So any of the services that have gone live are available on our Facebook page. They're available on our website in 2 different places. In the place where you can click on live streams in the top right-hand corner, that will take you to whatever the current live stream is, but also a whole archive of the old live streams. And then there's also a tab on the website called Video Services, and you can go there and you'll see the video services for all of the past few weeks for Choral Evensong and for the morning services. Everything that we do is on those pages.
And I understand that because technology has its ways of tracking us, that you can keep pretty good track of how many people are just dropping in or staying from beginning to end. How about that? How about the statistics?
Yeah, well, it's probably unsurprising to most people that Facebook and YouTube and these video services are actually following us around and taking notes. And so those notes get provided to content creators like us. So we can go in and see basic statistics about the general types of audiences that we get. So we can often see general location. So like what province you're from or the country you're from. You can see oftentimes your gender if you've provided that to Facebook, or your age if you've provided that to Facebook or YouTube, etc. So one thing that we've found, or pleasantly surprised actually to find, is that our reach is actually quite a bit bigger than just our Victoria community and even just our Cathedral community. There was a couple of stats that I was looking at. One of them was, for example, that on Facebook, about 85% of our viewership comes from British Columbia, unsurprisingly. But that still means that 15% of our views, which when you think about it, last year we had almost 200,000 views on all of the videos that we put out. That's a lot of views that are coming from outside of BC. On YouTube, it's even more of a contrast, I think, because YouTube is just more like international in terms of people find our videos differently. And so in that case, only 53% of our viewership is from Canada. The rest is from other places.
Wow.
So it's pretty amazing how the internet has totally changed the way that we get our videos out there.
Yeah. What kinds of things, because it's not just church services that we are recording or live streaming. So what kinds of things are people wanting to watch?
Well, I have to say, and this is not coming from my music bias here, but as you can imagine, because music is something that people tend to engage with a lot online, our videos that feature musical content tend to do a whole lot better than basically everything else. And in fact, they account for something like 80% of all the views that we get on all of our videos are for concerts or music pieces that have been recorded or things like that. So that's also an interesting way of looking at our video ministry in terms of how we're reaching outside of our community.
And do we have a top 10?
I have a top 3 or 4 or like this. I can tell you that in 2020, our highest performing video was actually the Ave Maria that was recorded back in April by Juliet Beckwith, the cellist, and Nathan Malzahn on guitar. I guess we broke through some sort of barrier there, over 12,000 views just on that video.
Oh.
So that was by far our highest performing one. So a whole lot of people really love Ave Maria, I guess.
and an offering by young people from the cathedral.
Yeah, which
is important to me.
It's really, really great. And it was something that we put together as a little bit of a bonus, I think, on the tail end of another recording session. So it's sort of nice that thing did so well. The second highest view count was for those Nutcracker videos that Donald and I did on the organ. And those did well, partially because it was a collaboration with another organization who also shared it a lot. And then our highest performing service, there's really 2, but one of them is really a diocesan event. It was the election of the bishop. That event had 4,938 views last year. So that's a lot of people that tuned in for the bishop's election. And then the second highest one was our Christmas lessons and carols service. In terms of, we had an online viewership through our own site of about 3,000 views over the course of a couple of weeks. And that's in addition to the reach that we had on Czech TV, of course, which is a different audience. So that's my sort of top 3, I guess.
That's good. And one of the things we're noticing when it comes to services is, and that's the statistic that I keep from year to year. And last year, for instance, our average Sunday attendance was just over 400. And if you count the most reliable statistic, and I gather that these are, it's hard to assess how reliable some of these video statistics are, but we're now averaging about 800 on a Sunday. Evensong has been interesting, hasn't it?
Yeah, one of the curious things about Evensong was that we were doing Evensong pre-recorded at first. So we would record it a week in advance and then put it out the following week. And when we were doing that, we were finding our viewership, for whatever reason, was fairly low. Maybe it was just the way that it was being disseminated across Facebook or things, the algorithm, whatever you want to call it. Those videos never seemed to do very well compared to the morning service, which was live at the time and was always getting a pretty steady 200 to 300 views each week. But what we saw is when we went live with Evensong in October, so the beginning of October is when we started to live stream the Evensong services, is that viewership went up a lot and has also become our more diverse service in terms of the reach. So the Evensong services tend to have people in other locations outside of our local community. Partially, I think, because it gets shared oftentimes with sort of Evensong aficionados in the UK and things like that. So for those Evensong services have now jumped up in their view count to sometimes surpass the morning services, actually, in terms of viewership.
So interesting what this pandemic is doing to us and for us.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, I think we need to stop because we promised we would try and keep these short, but thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for further offerings. We have a couple lined up over the next couple of weeks for you.
Thank you, Ansley.
Till soon.